Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Michael Hirsch of the Division of Public Health for the City of Worcester and also for the Worcester Senior Center with another edition of Stay Connected with the Worcester Senior Center. This is our November of 2024 edition, and I'm very excited about this edition. Why? Because when you get to November of a year, you're really starting to talk about the holidays, and we'll talk more about that as this session goes through. But Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate, it's all coming before us. And that's kind of my favorite time of the year because it seems like everybody is in a good mood. Everybody is generally feeling generous and counting their blessings, and that's kind of where I'm at right now in my own life. So I'm very happy about talking about November. So we'll talk a little public health, we'll talk a little bit about what November has traditionally meant, and we'll talk about two very important dates in November that I think you all probably are aware I'm going to be talking about anyway, but we'll get to that. So November comes from the Roman Latin word for nine, novum. In the old Julian calendar that Julius Caesar put together, it was the 9th month. But when it switched over to the Gregorian calendar, it became the 11th month. And it's a month of fall, but it has a lot of wintry aspects to it in times past. Now, according to the almanac, according to a lot of the meteorologists, there is this La Nina effect, a wind effect crossing the continent from California that is likely going to keep the precipitation rainy, not snowy. So I don't know that we're going to be going over the river and through the woods to Grandma's house over snow. It might be over a rainy pavement. But whatever it is, it's still that time when you start to really feel the holidays are coming. And you'll start seeing on TV all the Christmas commercials. As soon as Halloween is over, bam, it switches right away to Christmas commercials. So November is represented by a flower, which you're probably already seeing everywhere. It's the chrysanthemum, and it's a very popular flower to have on your stoop, to have in your window box, to have on your table in a little vase. They can be all different kind of colors. They're quite beautiful, but they very commonly have that fall colors to them, you know, the oranges, burnt oranges, the kind of yellows, going from yellow to kind of a more of a dark, arid kind of a yellow. They're very pretty. And similarly, there's the stone of November is the yellow topaz, which is a pretty rare stone. They're also quite beautiful. They're a form of quartz. They're beautiful stones. Now, November has a lot of things associated with it that we should talk about. So it is National Diabetes Awareness Month. So diabetes is unfortunately, a very common comorbidity, a baseline problem for many of us here in the United States. There are obviously two types. There's the juvenile type that you acquire sometime between the age of 1 and 12. That's a very different kind of diabetic problem where you're probably going to become insulin dependent. And then there's the other type of diabetes that comes on as an adult onset kind of diabetes. And usually that comes from being obese, eating a lot of the wrong foods, and And that's the kind of diabetes where many times you can control it with oral medication. And now with this family of glycopeptide medications, you probably have heard of Ozempic and Wegovy and Trulicity, all of that also becomes a way of controlling it. That's not getting insulin, but it's getting a weekly kind of an injection into your subcutaneous tissue to help control diabetes. Whatever it is, it should be controlled and not ignored. So if you're concerned that you're urinating very frequently, that you have an unusually rabid appetite, if you're always thirsty, those are some of the signs of getting diabetes. And originally, diabetes was kind of discovered scientifically because diabetics spill glucose, sugar, in their urine. And one of the great discoveries was that one day a scientist had a dog nearby a diabetic patient, and the dog was lapping up the urine because it tasted sweet. And that's part of how diabetes was first described back in the day. I think this was a Dr. Joslin, who has a famous clinic named after him in Boston. Anyway, you shouldn't ignore it because it has tremendous effects on your heart. It has effects on your blood pressure. It can lead to premature death if it's not controlled. So you gotta get a primary care doc on the case. They may send you to an endocrinologist, and please don't ignore those signs and symptoms. Get yourself checked. We around the Worcester Senior Center, we do glucose checks on people. We do them sometimes at health fairs, and we find a lot of people that are surprised because it doesn't necessarily make you feel terrible when you have a high glucose. Not until your glucose is really, really high. But if you catch it early enough, you can get medication for it. That's what I'm doing. I have the adult onset diabetes. I first got it when I was 53, and I've been on medication ever since, and so far, so good. This is also National Pancreatic Cancer Awareness Month. Pancreatic cancer is a very, very deadly form of cancer. It's difficult to treat because, unfortunately, it can grow extensively before any signs or symptoms are noticed. So what are the signs and symptoms? It might be that your appetite is a little off, that you're not eating as much. You might have some vague belly or back pain. And eventually, if the tumor grows big enough, it starts to obstruct some of your bile ducts. So you can develop what's called jaundice, where your skin gets yellow, your sclera, the white part of your eyes, get yellow. And if you discover it at that point, there are some fairly radical surgeries that can be done in some cases. It's a very difficult cancer to beat. And so the patients with this and the families of those patients need a lot of support. And fortunately, the American Cancer Society has had some very good programs for supporting cancer victims. November is also National Military Families Month. So this just honors the fact that now with an all voluntary military, it's a very small percentage of us who send our loved ones out in harm's way, whether it's Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, and now the Space Force. And those families spend a lot of time separated from their loved ones, trying to handle growing families as a single mom or single dad. they need a lot of support and respect, and I thank them for their service, not just the servicemen, but the families of the servicemen who are willing, through their sense of patriotism, to share them with our service people so that we can defend our wonderful country. November is also National COPD Awareness Month. So COPD is this form of emphysema that you develop usually from smoking. It's a very common side effect of smoking for many years. It really reduces the patient's ability to get enough oxygen. There are some medications now that have really helped with improving that, but a lot of it depends on smoking cessation. You've got to stop smoking if you're diagnosed with COPD. Even if you're not diagnosed with COPD, you don't want to get COPD, it's important not to smoke. And so that's why on November 17th, which is the third Thursday of this month, 2024, but it's the third Thursday of every November, is the Great National Smokeout Day. And on that day, we try to encourage people to quit. We try to enroll them in smoke cessation classes. We get them the kind of supports that they need, like Nicorette gum, nicotine patches. These are all the things that we know will help with cutting down on smoking. It makes a huge difference. And smoking in the United States, since the Surgeon General's warning about smoking causing cancer, started way back in 1964. So it's 60 years that we've kind of had an official warning from the Surgeon General's office. But what has been striking is that gradually, with a lot of the mitigations that have been done, not just in trying to get patients to quit smoking, but also taking smoking off of TV and off of TV commercials, it's become a little less popular. And so now the rate overall of smokers, say in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, is down to about 18-20%, somewhere in there. Unfortunately, in central Massachusetts, that rate is higher. It's closer to 30-31%. So we're a little bit behind eastern Massachusetts, and western Massachusetts is about the same as us. So overall, our smoking rate for the Commonwealth is somewhere around 24%. And I think we could do better. And we have some very great programs at the Department of Public Health to try to help with smoke cessation. You can look that up on our website, www.worcesterma.gov, and go to the health department. You'll see some very helpful tricks about how to quit smoking. So that's another thing that the month of November has recognized. As far as some of the prevention things that are happening in the month of November, well, November 18th is the newly crowned National Injury Prevention Day. And we run at the University of Massachusetts Medical Center a program called Injury Free Worcester, and we're participating in a national event on the 16th, not the 18th, because the 18th fell on a Monday, and on the 16th we're going to be doing an event here in Worcester. You can look that up also on our website, to try to promote the idea of wearing helmets when you're out riding a bike. I can't tell you how many times I'm driving around the city and I see, a group of 10 and 12-year-old kids out there without helmets. It really makes me very upset, because a helmet can reduce by almost 85% the likelihood of a serious bike injury. Yeah, if you fall and you have a helmet on, your likelihood of a head injury goes way down. You might break a bone, You might injure yourself in another part of your anatomy, but it's the head injury that gets you into trouble. So National Injury Prevention Day just looks at some of the more common things you can do to make your family safe. And I'll just rattle off a few things really quickly that I think everybody should have in their bag of tricks, right? If you're driving in a car, you want to wear your seatbelt. So important, so important. And if you get into a crash without a seatbelt, your likelihood of being severely injured or killed goes up by about 250%. If you're ejected out of the car, if it's a high-speed crash, when they find you on the roadside, you're probably not going to be alive because you went through a windshield and that was a second impact, and then you went onto the pavement. That was a third impact. So it's 3 crashes in one. You notice I'm not saying accidents because unfortunately, most of these crashes are not accidents because we could predict that they're going to happen. If you're driving impaired, if you're driving with speeding, if you're driving distracted, all of those things are going to be a setup for a crash. So the great equalizer, if you're wearing your seatbelt, it will reduce the likelihood that it will be a fatal crash. This is also, November is also National Impaired Driving Prevention Month. So this all fits together with the various prevention things that I was talking about for National Prevention Day. The other important thing, we talked about helmets already, we talked about seat belts. How about a working smoke alarm? Very, very important. You have to check those batteries. Many people just automatically change the batteries when we change the clocks, which we do now in November also, first weekend in November. We'll fall back, get an extra hour of sleep. So make sure you have a working smoke alarm. Make sure you have a working battery in the smoke alarm. There are smoke alarms and there are also carbon monoxide alarms. I think the carbon monoxide alarms are great, particularly if you have things like a fireplace or kerosene heater that you're using, a wood-burning stove. All of those things can cause a buildup of carbon monoxide, so that's a very important thing that you can have in your kit to make sure you're doing some very safe things. If you have little children, make sure that you are not lying in bed with them when you go to sleep. This co-bedding, I know many cultures encourage co-bedding, sleeping with your baby, but in this country, this is a very important cause of infant death. You don't really feel these kids as you're rolling over. You can roll over on them, smother them, and they end up dying from that. So it's much better to have a small crib, a pack and play kind of a setup. And in that pack and play setup or the crib, you don't want to put all clumpy, fluffy towels and fluffy blankets, fluffy toys or bumpers. You want it to have a flat surface. It can be, medium soft, but not so much that the kid can really dive into it with his face. And you just want to keep them safe, right? So co-bedding, not such a good idea. So I could talk about injury prevention all night. I'm not going to. I know that you guys are trying to be as safe as you possibly can. So we'll move on to some other topics. The other very important month that November represents is the anti-bullying and anti-cyberbullying month. This has become very, very important. Our kids, as you know, get really, really attached to their media, their social media, their phones, and it is amazing how destructive just one bad text or one bad photo or one bad comment on a social media site can be to the psyche of a young, impressionable preteen or teen. It's a very, very dangerous part of the world that our teens are living in. And there's all different kind of suggestions about how you can kind of monitor what your kids are watching, what your kids are looking at. I think it's easier said than done. A lot of parents are being very restrictive now about how young they will give a phone to a young person. But there are other reasons why a phone might be a good thing for a young person to have. If you live in a neighborhood that your child walking alone might be getting into trouble, having a phone that they can flip and call 911 or call you would be a very helpful thing. But a lot of parents are going away from the smartphones where a lot of this extraneous information coming in will get to your child. Instead, going to the old kind of flip phone or very simple phone where you don't get pictures and you can get texts, but they're not all duded up with photos and emojis and everything else. And that may be the solution if you want your child to have the ability to call out for help, but you don't necessarily want to deal with all the other junk that they could be getting into, cyber bullying, etc. Simple phone, not a bad idea. And just there's nothing that replaces in any of these injuries that we're talking about trying to prevent parental supervision, caretaker supervision. Nothing replaces that. You take your child to the playground, you can't assume that everything is going to be hunky-dory because the playground is relatively new. So you can't go to the bench and just fall asleep. You have to watch what your child is doing, what the child under your care is doing. Because sometimes, even though you think that someone wants to go down the slide, they're going to decide to go up the slide, and that's a way that they can sometimes fall off and break something. So, yeah, injury prevention is something I've dedicated my life to for really the last 45 years, so I sound like a broken record, I know. But 90% of the injuries that we see in the hospitals are preventable. If you had something that was that preventable and you weren't developing a vaccine for it, you would be liable for malpractice. And so the vaccination against injury is sometimes clunky. Helmets are clunky, seatbelts are not that comfortable. All these things that I've talked about take a little work, but it's like getting a vaccination from a terrible virus. You want to prevent 90% of the injuries around, just follow that lead. So talked a lot about what November is about. There also is, it's the National Native American Heritage Month. The Native Americans now, they call themselves also indigenous people, settled this country well before the white settlers arrived. And they initially shared the land, and then they were kind of pushed around and pushed off the land. And it's a kind of a tragic story. There's no question that they suffered from colonization, they suffered from being put on reservations, and they suffered from the illnesses that the Caucasian settlers brought from Europe that they had no immunity to. So there was a lot of death from disease. Here in Worcester area, we have the Nipmuc Indians to thank for a lot of our development here. They were initially not welcoming to settlement by white settlers here. It took 3 attempts at settlement for this area, but eventually they lived in relative harmony with the white settlement, but they suffered tremendously from the diseases that we brought. But there still is an active Nipmuc community, and I salute them for helping us settle this wonderful part of New England, and I think we all just owe them some gratitude. They taught us a lot about the local agriculture, the local wildlife, what we could eat and what we couldn't eat, and that leads me to, you know, my favorite holiday, right? Thanksgiving. 1620, the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock and made a settlement happen there with the help of local Indians. And as the tale goes, they had a harvest feast, which was officially declared to be the 4th Thursday of November, back in the age of Woodrow Wilson. And when that holiday came around as a bigger formality in American culture, it really took off, because I think, and this is how I look at it as well, there's no presents, there's no pressure on gifting and things like that. It's just get together, be thankful about having the family together, have a nice meal. Of course, turkey is the traditional meal, but I don't think it matters what you eat. I think it matters what you feel. And, you know, I feel incredibly grateful for everything that I have. I count my blessings every year on that day. I love watching the Thanksgiving Day parade. I love either cooking if I'm hosting Thanksgiving or going to somebody else's houses. Now that my children are older, they're starting to do the cooking, which is really cool. And so watching the changes in your family over the years. Now, I just turned 70 in May, and the changes that I've seen over the Thanksgivings that I have remembered, I think first one I kind of remember is maybe when I was around 5. Wow, it's a real testament to change, progress, growth. There's some sad things too. There's people around the Thanksgiving table that are there one year and gone the next year. So now I'm the old generation. I'm the grandpa in my family. I still remember my grandmothers being at Thanksgiving. Those days are gone, but not forgotten. And every time you think of those people, it's a blessing. And that's how they stay in your lives. And the key thing, I think, is to convey to your youngins who those people were, if they're no longer around. Like, who was your great-grandma? Who was your great-grandpa? So that they have a sense of the importance of family, and the traditions that each family develops over Thanksgiving are really unique. I just love that holiday. So that's what I get very, very jazzed up about November about. So I just wanted to do something practical about infectious disease stuff before we leave. Essentially, the good news is that the summer to early fall surge of COVID is behind us. The wastewater numbers are going way down. The hospitals are not seeing a lot of admissions anymore with COVID. The employees of the hospitals are not calling out sick with COVID. And I think that it is behind us. That being said, there is a new COVID booster out there that's available, that people that are at especially high risk, over 60 obese, cardiac problems, lung problems, problems with autoimmune disease, they should be getting that booster. Those people are more vulnerable, and we just don't know when the next COVID spike is going to be. Typically, it's been in the winter, and typically it's been at the same time as we are concerned about flu and then that other virus that strikes little kids and very elderly adults, RSV. 2 winters ago, in 2022, we had a tridemic. The tridemic caused such a surge in hospital admissions that we had to send young patients, particularly pediatric ICU type patients, far away to Maine, to New Jersey, to New York, because there just weren't enough beds in central Massachusetts, which is the main reason that we're advocating get that COVID shot and get the flu shot. And there's a new flu shot designed for folks over 70 that is a little stronger, but also makes it a lot less likely that you'll get a severe case of the flu. So I got the COVID and the elderly flu shot at the same time, and I did fine. I had a little bit of soreness in the arms. That was it. And now I feel like I'm as prepared as I can be for whatever comes in the winter. And you know, when we all go inside and it's a little more close quarters, that seems to be in the past when COVID would kind of take off again. But many people are wondering, well, maybe with this latest type of COVID Omicron variant that we had, maybe we're not going to see such a big boost in COVID in the winter. Maybe it kind of is going to be at least in the next year, a kind of a fall, spring thing instead of a winter thing. Whatever it is, it's great that the numbers are going down now. You should take advantage of it. And this beautiful fall weather that we've been having here in central Massachusetts, great for outdoor things, going to football games, having hay rides, spooky stuff around Halloween. This is all reasons that people want to stay in New England over this type of year. I don't really have anything bad to report about mosquitoes either, because I think with the colder weather, we've seen a diminution of mosquito activity. As a matter of fact, they're not even reporting out anymore the mosquito trappings that they're doing. They stopped doing it as of middle of October. And only thing we can say is that if this La Nina effect reduces the likelihood of a severe winter, we may see a very big mosquito season again next spring, because the larvae love the warmth and they can survive over warmer conditions over the winter, and then you get a bigger crop of mosquitoes next year. So we'll be dealing with these climate change effects with ticks and flea and mosquito-borne viruses for the foreseeable future, unfortunately. And we'll be kind of giving you those messages again as we go through the year, when you need to gear up with long sleeves and long pants and put on your DEET insect repellent. But for now, I think you're in pretty good shape. So that's all the infectious disease stuff that I could give you. And I'm going to close out by just saying I think this year, the most important thing that's happening in November is on November 5th. The election of the president this year. And of course, there's always down ballot senatorial races, congressional races, local state representative and state senator races, and different kind of referenda that are going to be on the ballot in individual parts of the Commonwealth. It's so important that you participate. It is the duty of every American citizen to participate. Voting is a a privilege, it's a gift, and it's the best way we have of maintaining our democracy. If we have low turnouts and people are apathetic, or people decide, what does one vote matter? Every vote matters. So I can't tell you how important I think voting is. I remember the first vote I cast was in 1972 when I was 18, and I was so proud. And of course I voted for the losing candidate at the time, but I think that it's an exercise in democracy that is unlike anything else in the world. And regardless of who you vote for, I don't really care. You have to exercise that privilege. Otherwise, we may lose it. You never know. I guess I'll quit here just by saying I hope you're as jazzed up about November as I am. And of course, we'll get even more jazzed up in December. But in the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful month, and thanks for listening. And I'll be back to see you in December. Thanks a lot, everybody.